The word alien suggests a creature that is foreign to this earth, but these so-called aliens can be found in our oldest recorded history, and history tells us that they have ruled over humanity as if we are some sort of livestock to them. The most common themes are that we are their slaves, and they enslave us by keeping us spiritually ignorant via psychological methods and genetic engineering. Sumeria existed about 7,000 years ago, and the Sumerian texts are perhaps the oldest written record in the Western world. They describe a race of creatures known as the Anunnaki, who were described as gods that traveled the heavens in flying orbs. They were interested in gold and modified the human species to effectively mine it for them. During this same time period, the Neanderthals mysteriously vanished, and modern man first appeared. This is one of the greatest enigmas of evolution theory, and can perhaps be explained by the Sumerian texts. According to the Sumerians, the Anunnaki gods practiced genocide to control the human population, the same way a farmer culls their livestock. And it was written that there were two factions of the Anunnaki. One side wanted to keep us spiritually ignorant as a method of control, and the other believed this was immoral and argued against it. As a result of this dispute, the Anunnaki attempted to destroy the entire human race with a great flood. And when that failed, they spread humanity across the earth and gave them different languages to keep them divided. This story is not only retold in the Bible, it exists in several other cultures worldwide. In Alaska, Egypt, Japan, and South America, it is taught that their ancestors were transported there thousands of years ago by the gods. The biological engineering of humans, population control, and the opposing factions on the subject of keeping mankind spiritually ignorant are three themes that continue throughout all of history and into the current day. One of the greatest mysteries on Earth is the construction on the Giza Plateau in Egypt. The official story is demonstrably false. The water erosion found on the Sphinx tells us that it is at least 10,000 years old, and nobody can explain how the Great Pyramid was constructed, or for what purpose. The ancient Egyptian writings tell us that they were living under the rule of alien gods that looked somewhat human, who traveled through the heavens in flying ships. The Great Pyramid is encoded with redundant advanced mathematics such as pi, the golden ratio, and the speed of light, and it would have made an ideal marker for aerial navigation. The four sides precisely aligned to the four compass points, and it was originally covered with a casing of reflective white limestone, which has since been excavated and would have allowed it to be visible from a great distance. It even has subtle indentations on each of its four sides, giving it a total of 8 precise compass directions. The story of human secret societies working for these non-human demigods most notably began in ancient Egypt. An organization known as the Mystery Schools was established, wherein the pharaohs and priests were trained in secret to act as middlemen between mankind and the ruling class demigod species. And it would appear as if they were deceived in these mystery schools, for this is where the pharaohs were taught to mummify their bodies and bury wooden boats as a way of achieving immortality. The mystery schools taught the high priests and pharaohs a distorted form of spiritual knowledge and suppressed all of it from the public. Egyptian hieroglyphics portray these non-human gods wearing aprons, and the Egyptian high priests wore aprons as well, presumably as a symbol of loyalty to the gods and authority over the populace. In around 2200 BC, the Melchizedek priesthood aprons were made of white lambskin, which was later adopted by the Freemasons, who still wear them today. The eyes of the Sphinx, as well as the Great Pyramid, line up with the star Sirius as it rises on July 23rd, which is when Bohemian Grove has its secret society ritual every year. Several ancient structures are aligned with both Sirius and Orion, which is where many ancient legends say these creatures originated from. The Egyptian hieroglyph for Sirius was the obelisk, the dome, and the five-pointed star, symbols that are still used today by several secret societies. If mankind was scattered throughout the earth to keep them divided, then it seems as if the mystery school priest class was given the job of managing over them at the behest of the alien gods. It was in the ancient world that mankind became too rebellious to be ruled over by these demigods, and so humans were recruited to act as middle management, much like the Judas goat, a goat trained to lead sheep to slaughter while its own life is spared. These people were trained in secret societies and seduced with power to betray their own people. The word Elohim in the Bible is plural. It does not refer to a single god, but rather the gods. The main god in the Old Testament, the one worshipped by the Hebrews, was a character named Jehovah, which comes from the Hebrew word Yahweh, or Yod-He-Vav-He. Yahweh is described as traveling through the sky in a ship, and when this ship would land on Mount Sinai, the mountain was covered with smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire. Yahweh had threatened to kill anyone who approached his landing site. Only a select few were permitted to see it, including Moses, who had attended the mystery schools under Akhenaten, the father of monotheism, which is likely why Moses pushed the idea that Yahweh was the one true God. But Ezekiel managed to see the landing site up close, and he described Yahweh's ship as being a pale yellow metallic structure from which creatures emerged that sparkled like burnished brass. Yahweh demanded obedience and slaughtered those who rebelled. He ordered his loyal soldiers to commit genocide and burn cities to the ground. According to Joshua, Yahweh manipulated those he wanted to be killed into fighting the Hebrews, who he then ordered to exterminate the opposition, a biblical account of Machiavellian divide and conquer tactics. The Bible is full of non-human entities, the Nephilim, several races of giants, and the Leviathan. The Greek translation of the Old Testament refers to the Leviathan as being a dragon. In the Torah, Yahweh is also described like a dragon. He could breathe fire from his mouth and set ablaze the foundations of the mountains. Smoke went up from his nostrils. He had pinions and wings, and he lived in a mountain. But when he lived on the surface with the Hebrews, he lived in a giant tent. And when the door to this tent was opened, thick plumes of smoke would appear. Yahweh also demanded a regular supply of virgins and gold. According to folklore, this is the description of a dragon. The story of the dragon exists in the ancient history of several cultures across the earth. From South America to Japan, people were said to have sacrificed virgins to dragon gods, and these dragon gods were said to be the progenitors of the ruling class. According to Chinese history, the first humans were created by a half-dragon, half-human called Nukua. The Yi King says that dragons and humans once interbred. The Japanese also claim to be descendants of reptilian gods, who once interbred with humans and produced reptilian-human offspring. Quetzalcoatl, one of many gods worshipped by the Aztecs, was known as the feathered serpent. Around 1500 BC, ancient India was invaded by foreigners known as the Aryans, who worshipped humanoid demigods and traveled through the skies in chariots described as having a thunderous noise and emitting a fiery red glare. These flying ships were equipped with weapons described as fiery beams. The Aryans enslaved the people of India with the oppressive caste system and enforced the worship of these supposed gods, which still exist in Hinduism today. The Dogon people of West Africa claim to have contact with intelligent non-humans from Sirius who introduced advanced civilization in Sumer. The Zulu tribe of South Africa claim the same thing. They describe a reptilian-like species, as well as a fish-like species, that they symbolize with the dolphin and whale. The subject of ancient aliens is far too vast to cover in a short video. But the important thing to remember is that all of recorded history is full of them. It is only in the modern era that humans have been led to believe that mankind sits atop the food chain. But one must use their best discernment when studying this subject, because the waters have been thoroughly muddied with misinformation, more so than any other subject, which tells us that there is much to hide.
UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. Advanced flying ships operated by non-human entities have been described in all of recorded history. They are found in the Sumerian cuneiform and in the Egyptian hieroglyphs. They are in the Vedas and the Bible. They are portrayed in the oldest drawings, carvings, and paintings. And in the early 20th century, when cameras became commonplace, UFOs were captured in photographs. When film was made available, they were captured on 8mm, and eventually on video. Now that almost everyone in the modern world has a video camera, there are hordes of video clips showing unidentified flying objects in the sky. The idea that such things are impossible and must be a hoax is a modern-day schism that began in the 1950s with Project Blue Book. These UFOs have been a part of our lives forever, and there is hours worth of material to cover. But we will begin with perhaps the most famous UFO story, the crash in Roswell, New Mexico. On Monday, July 7th of 1947, Roswell Army Airfield was notified of a crash by a local rancher. Major Jesse Marcel and Lieutenant Colonel Sheridan Cavett were dispatched to investigate. They recovered debris, and the U.S. Army announced that they recovered a flying disc. The next day, the story was retracted, and a press conference was held where they claimed it was actually a conventional weather balloon. In 1978, 20 years after retiring as lieutenant colonel, Jesse Marcel went public and revealed that the weather balloon claim was a cover story and that a flying disc was in fact retrieved. He described the debris as being an exotic metal with properties unlike anything known by the public, some of which contained unknown hieroglyphics. Colonel Thomas DuBose later came forward and verified this, and so did First Lieutenant Jack Trowbridge. All three handled this exotic metal and said that they were ordered to stay silent. In 1991, Gerald Anderson came forward, claiming that he and his father and uncle were the first ones at the main crash site. He said that there were 4 creatures outside the craft. 2 were dead, 1 was seriously wounded, and 1 was alive. He described the creatures as being about 4 feet tall, with gray skin and large heads, the typical description of a species known in UFO research as the Greys, and are said to be part of the Orion group. He said that his uncle was trying to communicate with the living creature until the military showed up and secured the location. Eli Benjamin, a private first class assigned at the Roswell Army Airfield in 1947, came forward in 2007 and revealed that he delivered 4 bodies to the base hospital the day of the crash, one of which was alive. At the hospital, he saw one of the bodies and described it as being about 4 foot tall with a large egg-shaped head and bluish-gray skin. The local mortician, Glenn Dennis, verifies this as well. All of these witnesses, and several more, say that they were ordered not to speak of what they saw, and that their lives and their families' lives were threatened if they did. Secret societies connected to non-humans can be traced back to the Egyptian mystery schools, and they have been managing world governments ever since. In the early 20th century, Germany began breaking free from this worldwide cabal by forming their own secret societies based on German nationalism. And their main agenda was contacting a non-human species that they referred to as the Aryan race in order to form an alliance and rise to power. The Aryan people took control of India during the ancient Vedic period, and according to the Vedas, the Aryans had advanced flying ships, known as Vimanas. Germany's obsession with the Aryans is what led them to adopting the ancient symbolism of the swastika. They believed that the Germanic people were descended from these Aryans, who they believed were from the lost city of Atlantis. The Thule Gesellschaft and the Vril Society were two German secret societies that officially joined together in 1919. That same year, a small group of them met in a secluded lodge with psychic mediums Marie Orsic and a woman known as Sigrun, who received visions in an unknown language for the construction of a flying machine. They believed the visions were coming from the Taurus constellation. The unknown language turned out to be a secret German Templar script. It was translated and given to German engineers. According to the raw material, the Germans formed an alliance with a reptilian species known as the Orion Group, and this would have been their first recorded contact. In 1923, Hermann Oberth published a book about spacecraft development entitled The Rocket to the Planetary Spaces, and founded the Society for Space Travel in 1927. Hermann Oberth claimed that he and his team were helped by people from other worlds. The RFZ-1, Germany's first circular disc aircraft prototype, was designed in 1937. In 1938, Germany arrested Louis Nathaniel de Rothschild, a member of the Rothschild banking dynasty who sit atop the secret society network. He was jailed until Germany received a $21 million ransom, which is about $500 million in today's economy. Continued contacts with the Orion Group led the Germans to explore Antarctica in 1939, where they expected to find Shambhala, the Aryan homeland, and a passage to the inner Earth, known as Agartha. Months later, they invade Poland, and World War II began. During the war, UFOs that became known as Foo Fighters were photographed by Allied forces. These Foo Fighters were reported by several combat pilots as balls of light that would follow and outmaneuver their aircraft. In 1942, shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor, UFOs were seen over Los Angeles and were heavily fired upon by the military with no effect. Documents found after the war suggest that the Germans were developing a device known as Die Glocke, a 4x3 meter bell-shaped machine comprised of two counter-rotating cylinders that seemed to affect the space-time field around it. The descriptions of Die Glocke were very similar to the ancient Vedic descriptions of the Aryan Vimana spacecraft, and both were fueled by a metallic liquid that included mercury. In 1945, two German submarines were captured off the coast of Mar del Plata heading to Antarctica. According to Russian military historian Dmitry Filipovic, an operation began in 1942 to transport thousands of personnel, including top German scientists and engineers, to an underground base in Antarctica known as Station 211. An estimated 120 German U-boats were unaccounted for after the war. Classified maps were found with instructions to the underground base, which was referred to as Agartha. In 1946, Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal launched Operation High Jump, a classified military operation under the guise of a scientific exploration. It was comprised of about 5,000 personnel, 70 ships, and 33 aircraft. The operation was abruptly terminated in late February 1947. On their return, Admiral Richard Byrd told the Chilean press that the United States should adopt protection against the possibility of an invasion by hostile aircraft coming from the polar region. In July of 1947, a flying disc crashes in Roswell, New Mexico. Weeks later, the National Security Act was enacted and the CIA was created. In 1949, James Forrestal, who commissioned Operation High Jump, was institutionalized in the Bethesda Naval Psychiatric Hospital and reportedly jumped to his death from the 16th floor. Evidence showed a possible struggle. In 1952, the U.S. Air Force logged over 700 reports of UFOs from across the nation. At the height of these widespread sightings, UFOs were reported at the nation's capital on 2 consecutive Saturday nights. At 11:40 p.m. on Saturday, July 19, 1952, air traffic control spotted 7 objects on radar, completely radical compared to those of ordinary aircraft. Other objects appeared in all sectors and flew over the White House and the United States Capitol. They were seen appearing out of nowhere, traveling at incredibly high speeds, making abrupt changes in direction and altitude, and vanishing. A week later, at 8:15 p.m., both the National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base were tracking them again on radar in every sector at speeds calculated at up to 7,000 miles per hour. Fighters were dispatched, but could not keep up with them. One pilot saw a white light that vanished when he moved towards it. Other pilots reported being swarmed by them. All radar personnel were convinced that the targets were solid metal objects. If this was the Germans establishing dominance to the United States, then the rest makes more sense. NASA was founded in 1958 with Wernher von Braun developing rockets. A founding member of Germany's Society for Space Travel, von Braun became director of NASA in 1960 for the Apollo moon missions. In 1959, the Antarctica Treaty was signed by 12 nations. It became law in 1961 and prohibits the military, private corporations, and the general public south of the 60th parallel without express permission from signatory nation-states. So what does all this mean? According to several researchers, the Germans gained the upper hand in the secret society network by aligning themselves with a reptilian species. They didn't lose the war. They infiltrated the Americas and established a headquarters in Antarctica and on the far side of the moon. And today, several nations are involved in secret space programs with non-human species. This is what Gary McKinnon saw when he hacked into the NASA computer network. And several UFOs have been captured on video flying across the surface of the moon. This is what former Naval Intelligence Officer William Cooper reported. And this is what Phil Schneider, who was born into the Black Projects after his father was brought into the U.S. under Operation Paperclip, has also claimed from his own experiences working in these secret programs.